I've been seeing reports of Chinese EVs coming to the US to destroy the auto market here for a while now, and I found some new data on here that really changed my thinking on this whole situation that you have to check out. It all started when I saw this video from Joe Blogs about the Chinese EV market. There's one point he made in particular that really just set me down this giant rabbit hole. See if you can spot it.
So all of this looks really positive from China's point of view. It's taking a large share of a growing market. However, over the past 12 months, there have been a number of investigations launched by governments around the world because they believe that the Chinese authorities have been subsidizing the electric vehicle market in China so that those manufacturers can undercut all of the other car manufacturers around the world.
Did you catch it? Did you notice the thing he said that seemed a little different than maybe the other narratives? There have been investigations to see if the Chinese government was subsidizing their auto sector to undercut other producers around the world. The notion here is that by subsidizing their auto industry, they're somehow committing a crime and they shouldn't be allowed to do that. However, as we looked at last week, governments all around the world subsidize industries to make them more profitable. In fact, the IMF looked at this recently and calculated that worldwide, the fossil fuel industry alone receives over $7 trillion in subsidies. And in a study published on the Institute of Physics website, it showed that for oil and gas, at a national level, the subsidies could altogether increase the internal rate of return of these new oil fields by 16 percentage points and of these new gas fields by 13 percentage points, representing an increase of 55 and 68% over unsubsidized levels, respectively. And they have some charts here to try to explain this, but I think they're a little confusing. Essentially, on the left side is the actual rate of return for investors without any subsidies, and on the right side, the orange bar is the return with subsidies. The idea being that these subsidies make up a huge percentage of the profits for investors in oil and gas. And that's a huge deal because the last I checked, the United States is the largest oil producer in the world and the third largest exporter of oil in the world, just behind Saudi Arabia and Russia. So why don't we have investigations as to why these countries subsidize their oil markets to be below the actual price of producing them? In many cases, they would actually be losing money without these subsidies here, meaning it's not profitable to drill for oil, but yet it is made so by the government. It seems a little one-sided, but actually there is another side to this story, as a matter of fact. As President Biden increased the tariff on imported Chinese EVs to 100% in 2024, they didn't take that lying down. No. China themselves actually filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization that claims the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA as we call it, formulates discriminatory subsidy policies for new energy vehicles, said China's Ministry of Commerce, referencing a classification that includes electric cars and hybrids. It added that the IRA distorts fair competition, seriously disrupts global new energy vehicle, industrial, and supply chains, and violates the WTO rules. And as the EU followed suit by increasing tariffs on Chinese imported EVs, they filed another complaint with the WTO alleging that the EU move amounted to an abuse of trade remedies that violates WTO rules and amounted to protectionist measures according to the mission statement. And this isn't meant to apologize for China unfairly subsidizing their industries to compete in the export market. It's just to highlight that if this is such a big issue, why aren't we considering complaints and reforms around the oil and gas industry as well? It seems like EVs are sort of singled out here. And we seem to be fine having our iPhones made in China, but when it comes to our cars, we seem to take issue. Why is that?
And in May 2024, the USA announced that it was applying a 100% tariff against all imported Chinese electric vehicles. So basically, the USA has doubled the sales price of those cars. And the application of that tariff, alongside US buyers' reluctance to actually buy Chinese vehicles, has meant that China doesn't really have any meaningful sales of electric vehicles in the USA.
I mean, technically, he's not wrong. I live in Southern California where we have almost all EVs running around, and I've never seen a Chinese one. But I'm guessing that's because there are exactly 0 Chinese EVs for sale in the United States currently. So someone would have to really go through some serious effort to get one and register it and be able to drive it on the roads here, if that was even possible. So when he says that there is reluctance to buy them, he's actually wrong about this, I think. In a study from autopacific.com, they found that 76% of respondents under 40 would consider buying a Chinese EV, despite 73% of that same group having privacy concerns about them. And in my demographic, the distinguished gentlemen between 40 to 49, and gentle ladies, I suppose, too, it's still over 50% saying that they would consider it. So reluctance to buy them when they're not available can't be a thing. And also the survey data we have here, albeit relatively small, kind of points to something else than reluctance. And all this is basically without any of these people ever even seeing a Chinese EV, let alone sitting inside one or driving one. And if you're a member, stay tuned because I do have a behind-the-scenes look at a bunch of Chinese EVs that I just saw at CES this year. So you can check those out. If you're a member, it might already be on the feed by the time this video posts. If you're not a member, of course, you can click the join button down below and get full access right now. Also at CES, I saw some pretty awesome robots, like this one from today's sponsor, Roborock. As a parent, keeping a clean home feels like an impossible task, especially with kids who seem to leave a trail of toys, crumbs, and chaos everywhere. That's where Roborock's new flagship models, the Saros 10 and Saros 10R, come in. These AI-powered cleaners are designed to tackle the toughest messes. The Saros 10 combines 22,000 Pascal suction with its Vibra Rise 4.0 mopping system to deep clean large homes like yours and mine, even handling fine debris like coffee grounds or stubborn stains. In the Saros 10R, it's a game changer for homes like mine, filled with toys, tangled cords, and furniture legs everywhere. Its StarSight 2.0 system scans 38,400 times per second, navigating around obstacles with precision, even in the dark. Both models are built to handle life with kids, pets, and everything in between. With advanced anti-tangle brushes, adaptive liftable components, and dynamic cleaning modes, they leave every corner spotless so you can focus on what matters most. Because your home isn't just any home, and Roborock knows how to keep it clean. Saros 10 and Saros 10R, cleaning smarter, living better. You can learn more about the Saros 10 and Saros 10R at the link down in the description, and thanks to Roborock for sponsoring this one. Now let's get back to the video. As I mentioned, that video from Joe Blogs just pushed me down this rabbit hole, really just got me going. We still have a lot to cover here and a lot of other things that really just changed my thinking. Specifically, just how far off I was on the threat that tariffs on Chinese EVs pose to U.S. automakers.
Wait, did I say that right?
Yes, tariffs on Chinese EVs pose a threat to U.S. automakers. Let me explain. Let's rewind the clock a little bit to the first Trump administration. It's 2018, and Trump is flexing his muscles by ordering a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum from every country except Canada and Mexico. This, of course, flies in the face of traditional Republican values like free trade, but he does it anyways. Now, the House Speaker at the time, Paul Ryan, remember him? Yeah, he was fun to watch, wasn't he? Anyways, he said that I disagree with this action and fear its unintended consequences. And boy, was he right. In November of that same year, GM actually ended up closing several manufacturing plants and laid off 14,000 people, citing the increased price of steel and aluminum due to tariffs as part of the cause. And in September of that same year, Ford said that those tariffs had cost them $1 billion in lost profit. And this is, of course, because tariffs, or taxes is another way to word that, lead to higher prices for consumers, which then limit how many people can buy them and maybe affect demand when other things aren't as affected by it. So when the price of one thing goes up and another one stay the same, you get more people buying the other thing. Pretty simple economics, right? And the Tax Policy Center had a good example of how this works. They said that a tariff is a tax on imported goods. Despite what the president says, it is almost always paid directly by the importer, usually from a domestic firm, and never by the exporting country. Thus, if the U.S. imposes a tariff on Chinese televisions, the duty is paid to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Service at the border by a U.S. broker representing a U.S. importer, say Costco. The Chinese government pays nothing. But how did we get here, and why are Chinese EVs so cheap to begin with? Well, in short, it's about the battery. Let's go back 20 years. China was importing a ton of oil, resulting in more dependence on other foreign countries to supply it. And locally, they had a massive air pollution problem, so bad that smog would block out the sun during the day, leading to serious health effects for all of its citizens. Of course, this scared off lots of tourists and hurt their economy, not to mention that they were hosting the Olympics soon, so they had to do something about all the air pollution. I mean, just have a look at the smog here on this traffic. You can barely even see the cars. All you get is the headlights because the smog is just so thick. And this is all prior to the advent of the electric car in China. They even ended up calling this the air apocalypse, and it really had a negative effect on China's economy. And you can see in this photo right here just the before and after of their efforts, their war on pollution that they did. Enter China's Minister of Science and Technology at the time, Wang Gang. In 2000, he proposed that China could leapfrog Western automakers by developing electric vehicles now instead of trying to compete with them on the internal combustion engine, which is already being developed by Western automakers for hundreds of years. This would not only put them on equal footing in the future with Western automakers, after all, it was 8 years before the original Tesla Roadster came out, it would also solve that pesky air pollution problem, all while reducing their dependence on foreign oil. And honestly, his proposal worked. China's air pollution levels have dropped by 42% in the past decade since the EVs there have really taken off. So this proposal from Wang led to massive investments by the Chinese government in the form of subsidies, cheap loans to companies looking to build EVs, as well as land grants for companies looking to mine the raw materials, really investing in the core components, e.g. the battery, of an EV. But where I live, considering we don't have Chinese EVs anywhere, it was really hard for me to understand how good they can be. So I called up my friend Elliot Richards, who you may know from the Fully Charged show, and he happens to live in China and review EVs there. So I wanted to see what his impressions are of these Chinese EVs and how the world perceives them versus how maybe they're perceived over there.
They knew they couldn't compete with gas cars. BMW has 100 years of history building gas engines. China can never compete with that. So they thought, well, we'll explore the area of batteries and electric motors, and we'll develop in that area because it's this burgeoning kind of technology. So they did that, and obviously, with state backing, they can go out and go after mines for lithium and etc. So the state backing it has a real big influence in that.
If you want to see the full version of that conversation, click the join button down below and become a member, and you can go watch it right now. Members, you know where it's at. It's in your private feed. Go check it out after you're done watching this video. So at this point, Chinese EVs are spreading like wildfire all over the globe, with their annual exports for the past 12 months as of October 2024 surpassing 5 million vehicles. Now, of course, I could be wrong. One way that tariffs can work is that they can incentivize these Chinese EV companies to build their cars locally, which is actually happening. So BYD is building a plant in Hungary for the European market, as well as Zeekr is building a plant down in Mexico. Zeekr is owned by Geely. It's one of the bigger, kind of more conglomerate-like EV makers or auto companies in China, as well as this could lead to collaborations between Western automakers and Chinese ones, such as this collaboration between VW and Xiaopeng on their charging network infrastructure. And in fact, Trump himself has voiced his willingness to work with Chinese EV makers if they build their cars in the US. But of course, this all could backfire. So if Chinese EVs take a significant share of the EV market outside of China, it could severely hurt US automakers. You thought I forgot about that, didn't you? How, you ask? Well, with the U.S. pushing back against the EV transition again and again, even domestically, it would force the U.S. automakers to continue selling their combustible vehicles, all while the rest of the world moves on and goes fully electric, leaving them in the dust. And we don't have to wait to see this happen either. Already, brands that were slow to adopt EVs are struggling tremendously. For example, the Stellantis CEO got canned due to poor performance. Not surprising since they were really late to adopt EVs. And VW is closing plants for the first time in history, again, after being slow to adopt electric vehicles. And even in Japan, something that is just unthinkable is happening. Nissan and Honda are looking to merge just to stay competitive, citing the transition to electric vehicles and competition from Chinese EVs as the reason. All of these companies were slow to make the push into EVs, and as a result, they're trying to stay competitive by any and all means necessary. And if this continues to play out, we could see a merger between GM and Ford in the future, which is just nuts to even consider that that's a possibility now because of the anti-EV stance that the US government has taken. It really seems obvious to me that the right strategy is to partner with these Chinese automakers and build competition in the market versus just trying to tax them to death, because it won't work. And what this ultimately comes down to, the bigger, broader picture, is a government trying to stop technology from advancing with regulation. And this is nothing new. Most recently, we can look back to how the government tried to crack down on peer-to-peer file sharing in the early 2000s. The intentions were good, it made sense, but alas, the industry and government failed to fully suppress what we now would just call internet streaming. And they had to embrace this new technology and set up fair rules so that it wasn't the Wild West anymore. And to me, that's the big revelation I had. Governments can't stop tech from progressing, no matter how hard they try. The only way to deal with disruptions like this that new tech brings is by embracing it and setting rules for a fair system that enables competition, ultimately leading to a better result for us all. Now, if you've made it this far, you absolutely have to go watch this video over here where I dive deep into subsidies around EVs and other industries, because I learned a whole lot about that and it really just blew my mind, and I know it will yours as well. Members, you know where to find me, and don't forget to check out the full interview I did with Elliot from China in your private feed. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you back here next time.